Hello and welcome to our Tangle of the Day. My name is Amy Lilien-Harper and I am a certified Zentangle instructor as well as being a children's librarian at the Wilton Library. I'm going to be teaching you a tangle today and we are starting off with some materials which I will introduce really quickly. So I'm going to be working with this pen. It's a Micron 01. You can get these at Michael's or Jerry's Artorama or any art store. You can see it has a very fine point. If you do not have this pen, as long as you have a fine point pen that's an ink pen, not a ballpoint, you should be fine. I also have my pencil. This is a Zentangle pencil, but any small soft lead pencil will work just fine. And lastly, I have my blending tool. It's called a tortillon, and you can see this is mine. You can see the tip is black because I've used it before. Now, before we get started, there's one other thing I want to show you. I am working on a very small tile. It's called a bijou tile. A standard size tile is this size, which is approximately 3.5 by 3.5. And you can see that my bijou is roughly a quarter the size of a standard size tile. I'm using the bijou because I'm only doing one tangle to keep the lessons quick and easy. So normally I would be working on a larger tile. Now, normally before we start our process, Zentangle has a series of steps, and I normally start with gratitude and appreciation. So we appreciate the fact that we have this time, that we have these wonderful materials. I also encourage my students to take a few minutes to take some deep breaths and relax and get themselves ready to tangle, get themselves into a mentally and physically comfortable state. But we're just doing an intro here, so I'm going to have you go ahead and do that on your own and then pick back up when you're ready. So the next step of the Zentangle process is your corner dots. And I am going to put a dot in each corner of my tile. And you'll notice that I am rotating my tile as I go so that my hand can stay in a comfortable position. The next thing I'm going to do is to create my border. And all you have to do is draw a line connecting each of your dots. And don't worry if your lines are not perfectly straight. We are all only human, and there are no mistakes in Zentangle, so don't get yourself stressed out about it. Okay, so I have created my border, and I'm going to put my pencil aside. Now, normally the next step we would do is create our string, which is a way to divide up our space. We'll not be doing that today because I'm just doing the one tangle. We call it a monotangle on this small tile, so I don't need to divide up my space, but normally that would be our next step. Okay, I'm now going to switch to my pen and we are going to create our tangle. The tangle we're doing today is called Bales. It is a grid tangle and it has a lot of variations. And you can do your grids perfectly straight or you can do them curved. It does not matter. Because I'm working on such a small tile, I'm going to go ahead and make mine pretty much straight here. So I'm just going to divide up my space into a series of roughly equidistant lines. And then I'm going to do that going this direction as well. You can see that's not a perfect grid, but that's okay. We don't need to worry about perfection. We just want to have our art be enjoyable and beautiful. Maria always says that adding a little bit of imperfection makes it more interesting. Okay, so I now have my grid, so pretty basic. And obviously you could do a larger or smaller grid, but this is a nice size for this small tile. And the next step we are going to do is we're going to create these sort of rice shapes on each of these lines. So you see how I made sort of a rice grain on there? We're going to do that on all of our lines. And I'm going to go ahead and just do all the ones going this direction first so that I'm keeping my hand in the same position. One of the reasons why the tiles are so small, even the regular size tiles are quite small and square, is because it allows you to rotate the tile as you work, and therefore you can keep your hand in a comfortable position which it also helps you with consistency, because if you're drawing the same line, instead of trying to draw in an opposite direction, you're more likely to get a fairly consistent look in your art. So I'm going to just finish this off going this direction. And then I'm going to rotate my tile, and I'm going to do the same thing going the other direction. And if you are more comfortable drawing yours vertically and holding your paper this way while you work, that is totally fine. I just started this way, so I'm going to go ahead and finish this way. And you can see this is really quite easy. This is not at all a difficult tangle to create. And believe it or not, we are just about done with the basic tangle already. So that is actually the basic tangle. That is Bales. Obviously we would shade it, but that's the basic tangle of Bales. There are so many different variations on Bales though. So I am going to actually show you, I'm going to do two or a combination variation on these. So you can just shade this and you have a completely legitimate tangle. This makes an excellent background tangle. I recommend it for that. I am going to show you sort of a combination of two different things you can do to sort of enhance it. So one thing you can do is to draw an additional aura around each of your original spaces. So it just makes the whole thing a little bit smaller in the middle. And it emphasizes, if you look, you'll see that the grid sort of starts to disappear. And instead what you're starting to see is a sort of flower-like shape. So much of tangling ends up becoming meta patterns. So often you start out creating one pattern, and when you're done, it's sort of the negative space or a different part of what you think you created that becomes the most visible part, which is one of the things about tangling that is so much fun. It is a little hard to keep track of which ones you've done when you do this. So I'm trying to do it in an orderly manner so I don't have one that's got an extra. Although that said, if I had one with a little bit with one extra or one less, if I'm not going to notice it, nobody else is either. So I'm just going to finish this off. And one thing you can do actually at this point is you could just keep making these little auras. And if you just kept doing more and more auras like this, they'll get smaller and smaller, and you end up with this cool kind of a pillow shape, which I really like, and I often do, but I want to retain the sort of bale shape that we started out with for today, so I'm not going to do that, but it is something you can do. I highly recommend looking up different variations for bales because there are so many different things you can do. So I think I've gotten all except my outside lines, so let me just go through and do those really quickly. I'm just doing this kind of quickly because I want to move on. You obviously can feel free to pause the video, but I want to keep the videos fairly short. And I think this was my last one. Yep. Okay. All right, so now my bales have gotten kind of fat. And one thing I sometimes like to do is to just put a line through the connectors of each of my spots. And again, that kind of emphasizes the sort of flower-like shape that we're creating here. And you can see this one goes off the corner, So I'm just going to do that. And then I'm going to have one here. And I'm going to have one here. And this is just a really easy little enhancement. Takes like 5 minutes. And it just gives a little extra interest. You absolutely do not have to do this. When you are done, you can completely choose which things you want to do. You can also do this particular enhancement without having done the extra layer, and that's another really pretty thing to do. I'm trying to show multiple different variations on this one tile, so it may get a tad bit busy, but that's okay. Oops, and I missed one. There we go. Okay, so that is 2 different possible enhancements. You could just put those X's through, or you could just do the extra aura, or you could do both. So that's actually technically that's 3. One other thing you can do, which now that I've put the lines through, I'm not sure how well it will work, but you can also aura sort of the inside of each of these boxes with another little sort of box shape. So that's another one. I wouldn't normally do all 3 of these together, but it does give you a lot of different options of things you can do. So it gives you a chance to see what some of the things are. And you can see I'm basically just doing another aura, but this one I'm not connecting the way I was connecting those other ones. And so you get kind of a little box shape in the middle. So those are a bunch of different variations for this one tangle. So I want to go ahead and do a little bit of shading now. I normally shade my bales pretty simply. I just kind of like to put a little bit of lead down at the conjunctions of each of these centers where everything sort of comes together. And then I just draw out a little bit of my lead just at these junctures, which then emphasizes the sort of rounded shape that we've created here. If you were doing the version where you just did the one aura and then did these center pieces, you could definitely shade the center piece instead. That's another really great option. There are many, many ways to shade every single tangle, and I can't show you every shading option on any given tile, so I'm going to stick with this one. But I will tell you, if you have a white pencil and you do this on a colored tile, I would use my white pencil to do a little bit of a highlight in the middle of these tiles. So I'm just going to put a little bit more. I think I could use a little bit more lead on this one. There we go. I put down a lot of ink, and so the tortillon's picking up a little bit of the paper there. It happens now and again. Let's see, did I get them all now? And you can see that when I use both my pencil and my tortillon, I don't hold them up and down the way one would standardly a pencil. I kind of angle them, and because they're so small, I actually tuck them right into my hand. But if you don't have a small one, you can hold it sort of like this. But you want to work with this sort of the side of your pencil, not the tip so much when you shade, and you definitely want to work with the side of your tortillon, because if you go up and down like this, you'll squish the tip. And tortillons don't last very long to begin with, and so you're really not going to have them last. All right, and that's it. That is our tangle of bales, or tangulation, because of multiple tangles. So we have completed all but our last couple of steps. At this point, what we would normally do is take our tile, hold it out at arm's length, rotate it around, decide what direction it goes, what direction do you like it, and also just take a look at it from a distance, because we've been looking at it so closely for all this time, and you really get a different view of it when you look at it far away than when you look at it close up. So I'm going to make mine go this direction. And then at this point, you put your chop on it. So that's just your initials, not a big signature, but a little signature just to say this is mine. You can put it actually in the tangle itself, or you can put it on the edge. I'm going to put mine right here. And then we turn over our tile, and that is where you would sign your tile and put any information you wanted and date it. I highly recommend that you date all your tiles because it's always so interesting to go back and see when you made them. So I'm going to put the date on here, and I'm going to write the name of our tangle. It's called Bales. I'm not actually sure why it's called that, but there it is. And there you go. That's Tangling Bales. I hope you had a good time. I hope you take your tile and appreciate it one more time. And I look forward to you visiting me again.